Welcome to another edition of Prep Rally from the Pueblo Chieftain. I'm Jeff Bersch, joined by fellow sports writer Jeff Letofsky. We're here to talk preps again, like we discussed last week, definitely winding down. Jeff was up in Aurora this past weekend covering state softball. I had a few football games here in town. We got 2 more weeks of prep football. Volleyball's heading toward regionals and state in a couple weeks, gymnastics as well. We've wrapped up tennis and softball. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk a little bit about his experience at the state tournament, where Central had a great run to the championship game.
Yeah, it was a great run, Jeff. This is why you play the game. This is where you hear the term. This is why you play the game, because Central is a team. I mean, they have one girl above 5'3", and it doesn't matter what size you are, or it's what's in your heart. And this team proved it. They started the tournament, beat Air Academy with a solid performance, and then they broke the Erie jinx, which is Erie's knocked out 5 Pueblo teams in the last 5 years. So they finally got over that hump and knocked them off, and that put them in the semifinals. It's been 5 years since a Pueblo team has reached Saturday, which is a semifinal. So it was quite a just to get to that point was really a win-win situation. And then they ran into Silver Creek, and of course the weather's a great equalizer in sports, as we know. And they just happened to it was cold, windy, the wind was blowing in. So I really thought when I woke up that morning, I said, Central has a chance here, because Silver Creek's a very, very good team, and they had just knocked off Valor Christian, the 3-time defending state champions. So you look at it and say, well, on paper, Central didn't have much of a chance. But when the weather turned a little bit and Central, the wind was blowing in. I mean, even though the wind's blowing in, people can still hit the ball far. But it made a big difference, because Central uses the small ball game. They like to bunt and run. They like to bunt and push bunt, and just you put a lot of pressure on the defense, and that's what they did against Silver Creek. And the play that keeps coming back to me, there was a ball hit to center field, by Pueblo's Taylor Puga for Pueblo Central with 2 runners on, and the ball would have landed normally in center field. It landed almost on the second base bag. The center fielder tried to make a great play. It bounced off her leg and went rolling away. 2 runs scored for Central, and that sort of put them over the hump. Put them in the championship game, where they really were behind the 8 ball, playing against a team from Mountain View that sort of on the other side of the bracket really didn't have a lot of competition. Yeah, really not a lot of competition on the other side of the bracket. You had Valor Christian, Silver Creek Central, and Erie on the other side of the bracket. So this team sort of snuck in there, and they got ahead of Central 7-0, and the Wildcats scored 3 runs in the last inning. Sort of made it interesting, but quite a run to finish second. In the state tournament. That's nothing to be sad about. I know it's happened before here. But and it's the second time Central's been to the championship, so you just never know. That's the whole point of everything. And also another note, that Pueblo County, they made an appearance up there for the first time in 15 years, and they showed well. Yeah. I mean, they really played well. It was a slugfest of sorts, 17-14. That they, they just never gave up, and that's sort of a typical of Pueblo team. So a great run by the softball teams in Pueblo, and that's what we expect. People up in Denver always know that they're going to play to the last out, and that's exactly what they did. So, moving on to the next sports, we obviously have some boys soccer going on. In fact, Centennial is playing right now up in Denver against Skyline, and they're the number 25 seed. So they have a tough road to try to get through. And I think the farthest a boys soccer team has ever gotten is semifinals. So. Good luck to the Centennial boys, and we'll know more in a couple hours. Yeah. But getting back, we'll talk a little about football now. Moving on, the 6-man playoffs start this week. We have 4 teams from Southern Colorado that are in the playoffs, and then of course next week we have the 8-man, the 1A, and the 2A starting. So we still have 2 weeks left in the regular season for the 3A, 4A, and 5A. So the big boys are starting to play, and a couple big games coming up here in Pueblo for our teams in Pueblo.
Yeah, the biggest this week is actually not in Pueblo. It's at Harrison, but it does feature Pueblo East. Obviously, the Eagles trying to get back to defend their 3 straight state championships. Started 0-5, but they've looked really good, at least in my opinion, in the last few weeks. Beating Durango, coming back to beat County, and last week I thought they played their best game of the year. Up 39-0 at halftime against Sierra, which is 1-7. But East went out and did what they had to do and took care of business. That game up at Harrison this week is just huge. It's the season for East. They win and pick up a win against Central next week, and they're in, and they. Like you talked about in softball, once you're in, anything can happen. And,
right.
I know the 5 teams they lost to all right now would make the playoffs. 4 of them are ranked. Two from Pueblo and West and South are very good 4A teams. So
I think we're seeing a lot of that, Jeff. Coaches are looking at the schedule in advance and trying to really beef up their non-league schedule because the RPI, of course, the ratings percentage index that really determines the teams that go into the playoffs. And so people are learning that really quickly, how important it is to play a great non-league schedule. And as we can see, East has played a great non-league schedule. It really hadn't helped them. We talked about this before last week, that the RPI really based on you have to win.
Yeah, a win would have been great for them.
But because they lost 5 games and the 5 teams that are probably all headed to the playoffs, it's really helped their RPI, and it's helped them, I think, more their confidence, knowing that, hey, we've played these good teams that are solid playoff teams, even a classification higher. So they're going to be prepared for anything that happens in the league. And as we've seen, they've sort of rolled through their league, and they still have a couple left to get through.
The East was in a lot of those games. I mean, Pueblo West, the score doesn't look like it, but it was close till the end. Discovery Canyon went to overtime. South, it was a lot closer than people thought it would be.
Right.
And Canyon City was a tough game, and Longmont to start the season they were in until about the fourth quarter. So I've covered East a lot this year, and I've really seen them progress. They've found some rhythm offensively with Luke Andrada and Kane Medrano. Marcus Winston caught a touchdown pass the other night. He's come back. He sat out a game, but they found a running game with Sebastian Benavidez. Defense is starting to pick it up too, and Harrison. We talked about scheduling. They've faced only one team to this point that would be in the playoffs. They beat an Evergreen team in week 3. I think it was 26-23. That's their biggest win. But Harrison, because of those wins, they're ranked 7th in the RPI, and this is a huge game for East, whether RPI or not. If they win the conference, they're gonna have that chance to go. So also another big week. Well, not big week, but South and West have some games that they need to take care of business before next week when they'll have a chance to finish out. South this week plays Sand Creek Friday night here at Dutch Clark, and Sand Creek's definitely down this season. South just needs to go out and take care of business like they have been.
Sand Creek has David Ramirez, who was the East coach that won the first state championship for the Eagles, and he's since moved on and been at Sand Creek and really trying to get that program turned around. It's been real difficult. They had a couple pretty good years. This year they're really down. Mm-hmm. They're really struggling. So, and on a side note too, in that South Sand Creek game, Jeff Bergstrom, who's was known as the part of the Fab Five here, the officials that were they were here for 8 to 10 years that they were together. And he's going to come back and work a final game at Dutch Clark Stadium as the referee, the white hat, so to speak. So look for Jeff Bergstrom if you see him out there, and tell him hello, because this is his final game as a referee. He's done it for 41 years. So this is his swan song, and we have a story in the Chieftain Thursday morning that will talk about that. And good guy and a great official, and had a great career.
Yeah, I know Jeff worked pretty hard on that story, and as an official yourself, definitely something that's close to your heart. But back to football, Pueblo West, they're at home this week against Centennial. Centennial's obviously had a rough go of it this year, 1-7. They need to take care of business. They have a wide field team next week that's playing pretty well too. And Pueblo West is sitting pretty right now at number 4 in the RPI. And if they can hang in there around that number 4 spot, definitely they could get 2 home games in the playoffs, which would be huge for them.
Yeah, that'd be big. And then of course, South is sort of in the same boat. They're trying to climb a little bit in the RPI and move up, and we're looking ahead maybe a little bit here a week from Thursday. You're talking about
it's a huge game,
playing Ponderosa, and you probably know a little bit more about that. But I've heard that people have said Ponderosa is the best team in the entire state in 4A, And we'll see. South can score with anybody.
Yes.
It's just a matter of what kind of stops they can get, and whether they can slow down this Ponderosa team. They score a lot of points too. So it could be another. We could see a Pueblo West, Pueblo South, like a 55-54 game with Ponderosa. So that'll be an interesting game as well.
Yeah, and Centennial's one of the teams that's faced both Pine Creek and Ponderosa this year. And I talked to Coach Wilkerson after that game, and he said they're both very good. Both are different kinds of teams, but he thought maybe Ponderosa was a little bit of a better team this year. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Those are definitely two of the top teams in the state.